and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we're joined by a couple of old friends, but great friends. PragerU's Aldo Buttazzoni. Aldo, if I don't say it, Buttazzoni, it doesn't come out right, as you know. As well as Univision political analyst Vianca Rodriguez. Thank you both for being with us. You know, it's funny because, Aldo, we've had this whole coronation of Kamala Harris. We know all the things the Democrats have done in a relatively short amount of time, right? Like 3 weeks. Biden drops out in the least democratic way possible. The Democrats coronate Kamala Harris, a person for whom no one has actually voted. And then she's going out on the campaign trail. She chooses Tim Walz as her running mate, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But it seems as though no one can really tell where Kamala Harris stands on just about anything. And then we've heard, as of this past Friday, although Donald Trump said it in June, famously, no tax on tips. You've had people writing all across the country. I went to dinner Friday night here in Florida, or Saturday night rather, here in Florida. My waitress here in Florida said everybody's writing no tax on tips, vote Trump. What does Kamala Harris do, Aldo? She comes out with the exact same policy on August 10th that Donald Trump has been talking about now for months. So I think a lot of people are wondering what to make of this. Is this a trend we're going to see with Kamala Harris going forward, that she's actually just going to steal her campaign ideas from Donald Trump? What did you think of Kamala breaking out with the no tax on tips, Aldo? Pretty interesting.
Well, first of all, we'll start with the coronation. By any objective analysis, this was a coup in front of our very eyes. We didn't hear from the president for basically weeks. Then they stole the primary nomination, just like they did to Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020. And so this really is, I think, a rebranding of Kamala. And, this is anti-Trump. I did a panel talking about Joe Biden versus Trump before Joe Biden dropped out. And every single person on the panel, they couldn't say anything good about Joe Biden. It was all bad stuff about Donald Trump. And I really think Kamala is going to be running that campaign, not of something that's pro-Kamala, but something that is anti-Trump. And I think that's what we're going to see in all of her messaging. I think that's exactly what we're seeing with the no tax on tips. And how effective it's going to be is really going to fall on how effective the propaganda machine of the American media is. And so far, it looks like it's pretty effective, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think is correct. It's funny, Vianca, because you go back and you look at the media coverage of particularly Kamala Harris. Let's flash back to, like, say 3 months ago. And a lot of folks in the mainstream media and certainly in the leftist media were saying, I don't know, maybe Biden ought to choose a different running mate. Does anybody remember this? Kamala Harris is not polling well. People don't really like her. Maybe Biden would be better served if he chose a different running mate. And now here we are. We're all supposed to believe the fanfare, the bells and whistles. It's a lot. There's a lot of jazz hands going on. And, oh, look over here. Look at how great Kamala Harris is. Never mind all of her outrageous policies. Never mind her failure as the borders are. Don't worry about any of that. You should just look at how great she is because she's not Joe Biden. So I do think Aldo is right about that it's going to ultimately come down to how much nonsense these folks within the mainstream media are able to spew and what is it that people actually buy at this point. But I think a lot of people are wondering, okay, if she's going to start adopting Donald Trump's policies, that's great. Let's adopt them right now. Bianca, why not? Hey, you're the border czar. I hate to remind Kamala Harris of this. You're the border czar. If you want to start adopting Donald Trump's policies, you're in office right now. Go ahead and shut down that border. Go ahead and actually apply the law as it's written on the books. You don't need another law. She keeps doing this thing where she goes out and she says, Donald Trump is the reason that the border is not secure. He told people not to vote for it. No. You've got a law right now on the books, Kamala. You could apply and you could actually, make sure that people aren't crossing our southern border. Vianca, why doesn't she just start doing that if this is how we're going to operate? If you're going to do that, close the border. Hey, heck, open up the Keystone XL pipeline that you and Joe Biden shut down first day in office, first thing you did. Maybe we'll see a little more support for Israel. I would say if Kamala is going to start adopting all of Trump's policies, great. Start doing it now and start helping out the people of this country. What do you think of that, Vianca?
100%. The only reason why she's not doing anything right now, even though she has the power in her hands, she is presiding over the Senate. She has a lot of policies that now she is in favor of that apparently have bipartisan support, like, for example, securing the border. The only reason why she's not doing that right now, it's because she wants to maintain power. Like, she wants to take over the next 4 years after Joe Biden. She wants to maintain power. At the end of the day, power corrupts absolutely, and that's what the Democrats are in for. They're not caring at all about what's going on. They don't want to improve the livelihoods of American citizens, because if that's what they really wanted to, she wouldn't be simply talking about what she could do once January comes around for in a couple of months that she would be ideally taking over. She would be doing the changes now, or she would have done them with Joe Biden 4 years ago or 3 years ago, or just a couple of months ago. But they're not interested in actually improving anything for anyone. They're only in it for the power. And I bet you that she's only desperately looking to maintain the White House because there's probably a lot of other things, other nasty things that are going to be coming out of her, just like has been coming out for the Biden family. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at this point. Like, the Clintons are all corrupted, the Obamas are corrupted, the Bidens are corrupted. What's next? The Harrises?
Well, I would say probably that's accurate. I don't think that you get to these positions in Washington, D.C. without a lot of corruption. And I think the reason that people are so adamantly against Donald Trump, and by people, I mean the swamp, I mean the folks in the mainstream media, I mean the machine that is behind all of these people, the reason they hate Donald Trump so much is because he's not part of their team. He cannot be controlled. He cannot be bought. He cannot be paid for, because Donald Trump is his own man. He makes his own decisions. And a lot of people, that's one of the things they don't like about him. Look, you never have to wonder when Donald Trump posts something on Truth Social or when he used to tweet back in the day, is that really Donald Trump putting that out? Absolutely it is. You didn't have any question, Aldo, about it, because he's so authentic. It's almost, to some people, authentic to a fault. And he's transparent to a fault a lot of times. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. But, that's the reason that he is actually probably the only person who I believe could go into that White House, do the things that are necessary. And it's the very reason that the folks in swampy Washington, D.C. hate him and are desperate to do anything they possibly can to keep him out of that White House.
Yeah, well, look at the enemies that Donald Trump has made, and you can find them on both sides of the political aisle. And this is why I always tell people, Donald Trump truly is the third party option. He is the only option that both sides of the aisle despises. We have the
right.
Kissingers and the Liz Cheneys, and then you have the Adam Schiffs and the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers. Both sides of the aisles, both sides who have been taking these bribes and who are deep into the corruption and using the corruption to keep their seats. They are so upset that Donald Trump is the only one that is really resonating with American voters. And they see that he gave up his lifestyle. He gave up a penthouse in Manhattan to serve the American people, to take a bullet for us, and to try to just make America great again. And I think that's resonating with a lot of moderates. That's resonating with a lot of Americans, especially after he took that bullet. But yeah, it's incredible.
Right. So, yeah, look, we know that all of these people are compromised in D.C., not the least of which, as Vianca just pointed out, is Joe Biden himself. And, Joe hasn't really done a lot of anything since he announced he was stepping down from this campaign, this run for office. Supposedly, Vianca, he's still the president, I guess. I don't know. We saw him over the weekend relaxing and lounging on the beach in Delaware. Seems like he does a lot of that. He went on a nice long bike ride. No shade. I love a good bike ride, but I'm also not president right now. Just saying. He finally did an interview with CBS. It's the first interview that Joe Biden has done since he posted, we'll suppose Joe Biden posted it on X and said, I'm stepping down. He did that of course, announcement from the Oval Office. He did the address. But he did this interview with CBS, Vianca, and they were like, what really happened here? How did this all go down that you decided, you said on Friday, it would take an act of God to get you out of this race. And then by Sunday, like 48 hours later, you're posting, I can't do it. I'm going to pass the baton, on to Kamala. He said a number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought I was going to hurt them in the races. And I was concerned if I stayed in the race, that would be the topic. you'd be interviewing me about why did Nancy Pelosi say, and then you can't really understand what he said. And I thought it would be a real distraction. Excuse me. He brought up Nancy Pelosi's name of all people, Vianca. And I think it's pretty apparent what happened here. Aldo refers to it as a coup. I would absolutely agree with that description of what happened. It's pretty clear that the Democrats were like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster. It's going to be a landslide for Trump. We got to get old Joe out. We're going to go to him and we're going to just really go hard on him. They sent Nancy in. I assume they probably sent Chuck Schumer in. He's been a little dodgy with his answers as well. They said, we're going to have Kamala bring up the 25th Amendment and your legacy will be destroyed unless you step aside and let Kamala Harris take the reins and take over. The fact that he talked about Nancy Pelosi specifically, did that surprise you at all, Vianca? Because I think we all assumed that's what was going on.
I mean, it didn't surprise me on one hand because, like you said, I agree with the both of you. This was definitely a coup because they did not follow the typical primary process that everybody else had to follow, including Donald Trump. But at the same time, it did surprise me that he pointed her out single-handedly because considering how powerful the deep state is, I'm actually a little bit concerned for his well-being. Like, I wouldn't be
just
surprised
saying
if something were to happen to him in a couple of days or weeks. Who knows? I feel like politics, like the weeks as they, and it feels more like months, especially with everything that has gone on in this last month alone. But yeah, no, it didn't surprise me at all that that's what had been going on behind the scenes because everybody had been talking about this. We've been talking about it in our show as well. It's just there's no other explanation as to why now, and particularly at this point in time, with just a couple of days away from the general election. And the thing that bothers me the most is that Donald Trump did go through it arduous through a really, really difficult, primary contest, even though we knew he was going to ultimately be the nominee. But the fact that he followed the rules, he did everything the right way. And now we have Kamala Harris being spurred up out of nowhere, out of the blue, even though she's been the vice president for the last 3.5, almost 4 years now. In 2020, when she was running the first time around for president, she wasn't even polling above 3%. She couldn't even get to Iowa, to the first primary election. She had to drop out before then because she was deeply unpopular. She had been deeply unpopular then, and she's still deeply unpopular now. The only reason why now we're seeing such great coverage for her is because they have people that work in mainstream media that favor them, and that's why she's getting all of this favorable coverage in her way. But if anything, that just proves how inauthentic she is, that she has to pay OnlyFans influencers and a bunch of other people to be able to spew anti-Trump content, and Trump doesn't
Megan
need
the
to do
Stallion to perform at your campaign events, so people show up and then people start leaving whenever her performance is over. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like Aldo, they put Joe Biden out there and they're like, God, please, Joe, don't say anything crazy. Please don't say anything crazy. And then he starts spouting off about Nancy Pelosi, this and that. They're like, stop. Like, oh my God, he might tell the truth about what happened. The craziest part of all of it, Aldo, to me, is the fact that we're just supposed to, as Americans, accept what has gone on. Like, oh, just move on down the line. Let Joe do an interview with CBS. We're not going to talk about the fact that we're here at this moment in America, that we've just completely thwarted the democratic process and the 14.5 million people who voted for Joe. We're not talking about, we're just done. They want to sweep it under the rug, Aldo. We're just supposed to all move on.
And not only that, but we're just going to ignore the current sitting president, right? If Joe Biden, like you said, was so gung-ho about running, he promised all of his supporters that he was not going to drop out. If he's unfit to run for the next election, how is he fit to run the country right now? And we have so many Americans that are completely ignoring this. And think about his supporters, not just Joe Biden dropping out of the race, but his supporters like Harry Sisson on Twitter, who said, I will vote for Joe Biden no matter what. He has my support no matter what. And then again, overnight, all of his supporters are just changing out and they're going over to Kamala Harris. And that's something I've noticed in the panels I've been on, in discussing with people on the street and what have you, is Kamala supporters are voting for the party. They're voting for the deep state. Quite literally, they're voting for the shadow government. They're voting for the people behind the scenes. That's what they tell me. Well, we're not voting for Kamala specifically. We're voting for everyone around her. Whereas Donald Trump supporters, we are voting for the man that is supposed to be running our country. I know that's a novel idea, that we should be voting for the man who says they're running for president. And I think it's a very alarming precedent to set that people are comfortable voting for people behind the scenes and not the person who says they are running. Very scary.
Well, and it's terrifying. And it just actually goes to show you how misinformed people are. You know, everyone's misinformation, disinformation. If something is being spoon fed to you out there, I don't care what it is, you ought to be questioning it. If you have learned nothing from the past, like say 6 years or so in this country, that's one thing you ought to know. You can't just take things at face value. Oh, Kamala Harris is great. Investigate. Just do a little bit of your own research. Elon Musk posted something, and I thought it's spot on. You watched the Hunger Games and sided with the resistance. You watched Star Wars and sided with the resistance. You watched The Matrix and sided with the resistance. You watched Divergent and sided with the resistance. You watched V for Vendetta and sided with the resistance. When it's fiction, you understand, yet you refuse to see it when it's the reality you're living. And I would just also add, he also posted, you could put this as the caption of that whole thing. When the corporations are advertising your movement, you are not the resistance. When you have the machine behind you, Vianca, you are not the resistance. Whenever everything is telling you this is sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows, don't look at anything else. You should probably at that very moment go look at something else, because that should raise alarm bells to everyone. I want to know out there, really, where do people stand? Because there has been all of this very obvious faux momentum put behind Kamala Harris. There's a huge push. Look, they've dumped tons of money into advertising. I can't turn on the TV without seeing Kamala Harris's face. I can't open my computer or scroll through my phone without seeing a Kamala Harris ad. There's no doubt they're dumping money into this right now. But the real question is, does it really resonate with people? Do people buy into voting for Kamala Harris, a relative unknown? Someone who, again, 3 months or so ago, a lot of folks were like, might not be the best choice as a running mate for Joe Biden. And now all of a sudden she's the shining star. Do you think it is working on people out there, Vianca? What's your sense?
Well, the polls are going to say one thing, and they're going to be bragging about the New York Times poll for the rest of the week. But at least the conversation that I've had, and, you know, on social media, even when I post my videos and whatnot, it's a lot of, I would say at least 95% of the feedback that I get from people, it's like they're for Trump. Regardless, they're not going to believe anything that is being put out by the Democrat Party. And surprisingly, a lot of people that would identify as independent or not as partisan as we typically are, or actively political, are the ones that are finding this to be very weird in the whole situation that we're, you know, finding ourselves in, because she has all the support, like you were mentioning, from all the institutions. And typically you would think that that's propaganda, because actually, in a way, it kind of is. And when you look right across the pond in Venezuela, what's happening there, a lot of Venezuelans that live here are seeing what's taking place, and they're already warning, like, this is how it more or less started back home, back in Venezuela, because the government or the regime, Maduro, he labels anything that is basically the opposition there as misinformation and disinformation. And we're already seeing that happen here. It happened during the 2020 elections for the pandemic. It happened even in itself with the elections. It happened with the Hunter Biden laptop story. And now, just years after the elections happened, after interfering in our own elections, is now that they say, oh, wait, kidding, actually, you guys were right. And we've been gaslit, and it's crazy. In a way, it's crazy and it's ridiculous, but in a way, it's so dangerous. And I know that at least here in Florida, in South Florida, in Miami, and as well as Arizona, which is where I used to live, a lot of people are not really vibing, if that's a good term, with Kamala Harris because of everything that's been happening up until this point, and because it really mirrors what could possibly happen from other countries and what could be implemented here. And it's super, super dangerous.
The people I talk to who are the most upset about what they see happening in our country, and the way that things have run in the past, I'm going to say year, maybe 2 years. I think it was 2 years ago or so in August when you had the FBI raid Mar-a-Lago, you know, all of these criminal allegations against Donald Trump. Oh, how convenient is that in an election season when, this is the DOJ of Joe Biden, his then opponent, of course. Those sort of things, the way we've seen things go over the past 3 weeks with Kamala Harris now as the candidate for the Democrats, the people who are the most upset about this, to your point, Vianca, are people that I know from Venezuela, from Cuba, from Russia, who've all moved here to the United States, legally immigrated, and they say, oh my God, I never thought it would happen again. And it's happening here in this country. It is terrifying to see what's happening. And they're beside themselves because they've seen what comes on the other end of something like this. They know how close we are to really losing the country that we've really always known. And I hate to tell people, once you go over that line and once you cross that threshold, you do not come back. Mm-hmm. And it's really why we are all out here fighting as hard as we can and doing as much as we can to reach out to people, to talk to people, to remind people that this is the most important election of any of our lifetimes. And I know everybody says that every 4 years, but it really feels like it now. And not the least problematic thing right now, but one of the big things that I think people are focused on is the person Kamala Harris, Aldo, chose to run as her vice presidential running mate. She had an option. We heard about Mark Kelly from Arizona. We heard about Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania. And common knowledge would dictate that you probably need to win Pennsylvania in order to become president of the United States. It's not even a probably, it's a must. You have to win the state of Pennsylvania. And Josh Shapiro was really, kind of like the front runner. Everybody felt very strongly it was likely going to be him. Even on this show last week, we recorded this show just before they made their announcement as to who it would be. And I got to be honest with you, Tim Walz, we mentioned, but utterly shocked by that choice. You look at the fact that they made Josh Shapiro, a Jewish man, come out and denounce his pro-Israel views very publicly. Almost in a shameful way, like he ought to be ashamed of himself for 20 years ago, writing that he supported Israel as a Jewish man. Are you kidding me? And then they snubbed him to go with a pick that people are like, what? From Minnesota, a state that Democrats usually always win. Now, we did put it on our battleground map. I will concede that. But Tim Walz is very radical. They're trying to paint a picture of this guy as, he's kind of the common man. He served this country in uniform, all of those things. But when you, Aldo, get down to just the bare bones of what's going on here, you very clearly see when Kamala Harris has a decision to make and she could pivot one way or another, she pivoted left and she went far left. And I think that is another thing that is putting alarm bells up for a lot of people and raising a lot of flags for a lot of people because they're like, oh my God, it's not even like she went towards the middle and picked someone maybe a little more moderate to appeal to a bigger swath of the country. She kind of doubled down on her very radical views. She was labeled as the most far left liberal senator in the United States Senate. They tried to erase that off the internet too, but that is also true. And alongside Tim Walz, this is a radical far left ticket that doesn't really look a lot like most of the country, Aldo. That is also very scary to a lot of people. If you suffer from chronic pain, listen up. I think you guys know by now that I am a total fitness fanatic and always looking for ways to improve my health. That's when I discovered a turmeric supplement called Golden Revive Plus. After taking it for just a few weeks, I started to feel relief in places, quite frankly, I didn't even know I had pain. This stuff is incredible for reducing pain in your knees, back, hips, elbows, hands, or feet, and I wanted to share it with as many people as possible. That's why I'm recommending it on my podcast with a special discount just for the Right View listeners until August 31st. You can get 30% off your first order of Golden Revive Plus. Just head over to goldenrevive.com and use promo code Trump at checkout. Over 300,000 Americans just like you are already using Golden Revive Plus to get and stay pain-free. Again, head over to goldenrevive.com and use promo code Trump at checkout for 30% off your first order. You've asked and My Pillow listened. they're finally bringing you the most requested offer ever. Right now, you can get the queen size premium MyPillow for only $19.98. MyPillow is made with patented adjustable fill, and it adjusts to your exact individual needs regardless of your sleep position. It helps keep your neck aligned and holds its shape all night long so you get the best sleep of your life. But that's not all. Get their 6-piece kitchen or bath towel sets for only $25, the brand new mattress topper for as low as $69.98, and their famous MyPillow bed sheets for as low as $25, and so much more. Go to mypillow.com or call 800-624-3945 and use promo code TRUMP to get huge discounts on all MyPillow products, including the premium queen size MyPillow, only $19.98. That's the lowest price ever. Don't delay, order today, and use promo code TRUMP.
Well, think about what their pick says about the values of the Democratic Party. I mean, first of all, you don't choose somebody and not know everything in their past. Tim Walz, he oversaw the state during the George Floyd riots, billions of dollars in property damage. He is very, very radical left, and they still went with him over Josh Shapiro simply because he was a Jew. I mean, think about what that says about the Democratic Party. If you're a Jew out there and you're voting for Kamala Harris, I mean, what are you thinking? But putting that aside, Tim Walz is also somebody who on the campaign trail and throughout his entire career has proudly said that he served in war, that he carried weapons of war, that he was out there on the battlefield. This is a clear-cut case of stolen valor, and I know that's going to really hit home with a lot of veterans. Veterans talk very often. They're in group chats together, and stolen valor is not something to be taken lightly, especially in the Midwest and especially in key battleground states like Pennsylvania. So I don't see this going well for them, but only time will tell.
Yeah, the stolen valor thing, it's funny because, look, I've never served our country in uniform. I have many in my family who have. All 3 of my cousins, all from the same family, all served. 2 of them are still serving to this day, and I'm incredibly grateful and just so indebted to any person who puts on that uniform and serves in any capacity they did. But I started initially, Vianca, I was like, well, is this that big of a deal? And then talking to the people I know who are either veterans or current active duty military, yeah, it's a pretty big deal. And to Aldo's point, Vianca, it's not as though he at any point was like, well, I served, but only in this capacity. No, he even in 2007 accepted praise from Nancy Pelosi. She was introducing him to speak at some event. And she said, we all appreciate his service on the battlefield. And then he gets up, and it would have been easy for him to say, well, I appreciate the accolades, but in fact, I did it. Like, just a small correction. He's like, thanks, like, really appreciate it. But according to CNN, if you even question why he has done this his entire career, you are being offensive and dismissive to veterans, to even question anything that happened with Tim Walz. Well, I think it's very appropriate. Look, we need to know the character of people as well who are running for office. Like, there's no doubt they criticize Donald Trump every possible chance they get out there. So yeah, whenever you do something like this that maybe has been misrepresenting who you actually are, I do think that it's appropriate. A lot of people say stick to policy, but it's kind of, to me, it's a little more evidence of how the Democrats are willing to just like manipulate the truth wherever necessary and just kind of edge things in their direction. You could argue this is another example of that, Vianca, and that's why it matters to people.
No, and I mean, it's one thing to like actually, and this is not even to take away from the fact that he served. Yes, he served in the National Guard and we appreciate his service. But the fact of the matter is that he embellished a little bit his record, and he refused to correct multiple times people when they pointed this out, or when they said, there was one interview where somebody was saying, oh, so you served in Afghanistan, and he was just nodding his head and going ahead with it. He wasn't even correcting the record. He never went to Afghanistan. He served in Italy. But you could say that, but he doesn't say that. He corrected that years later. And I think that not only is that just, again, inauthentic, just like Kamala Harris, but it also questions the credibility of someone where you're not able to come across as your true self and not be honest with the people. Because if you're not honest with yourself, then you're not going to be honest with the people. Then that means that you're not going to do good policy. And at the same time, in that same record, the fact that he quit just mere months before his team was going to be deployed also goes to show his character. And if you're unable to fulfill that in the way that somebody like, for example, JD Vance, after 9/11, he chose to go and serve in the Marines for 4 years. And he's also a veteran, which, by the way, there's a lot of people in the media, and I think it's so disgusting, that are now saying that JD Vance does not qualify as a vet simply because he served 4 years and because Tim Walz served 24. I think that's disgusting. They're both equally veterans. But like going back to that, it shows his character, because if he was unable to do that back then, how is he able to serve the country as a whole today? What makes him different now, and what makes him capable now and more courageous to be able to do the right thing now? I don't think that a person like that changes out of the blue. And sure, you can flip-flop on policies, but that also just goes to show that you're not true to your own self or your values, and that you're only craving power. And somebody like Tim Walz is just not trustworthy. Maybe somebody like Josh Shapiro would have been a little bit more trustworthier, because in Pennsylvania, well, he does count with a lot of surprisingly Republican support. But either way, their policies are abhorrent, because they're Democrat radical policies that have destroyed their own states. Minnesota, in fact, they talk a lot about, oh, they've touted free, they've been able to expand universal free lunch for kids in schools, but they don't talk about, and this is actually discussed in local reports, that it's had a tremendous cost on taxpayers. Yeah. And there's a lot of wealthy families that have been benefiting from it that don't really need it. So Milton Friedman once said it himself, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And that's just something, like, the fact that we're not able to even talk about these policies and criticize them openly goes to show how much they're playing in their favor. Like the media, all the institutions, everybody's trying to distract from the damage that these people have already proven to cause and that will continue to cause, simply because they want to maintain them in power, and they just want to focus on other irrelevant things and not talk about the real policy.
I always want to ask people, whenever something is like free, do you really think it's free? Somebody always has to pay for it. Well, oh, let's get rid of student debt. Oh, cool. Somebody has to pay for it. There's no free lunch. Of course, the taxpayers of Minnesota are paying for these lunches. In some instances, I think that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, of course, no kid should go to a failing school. No kid should go without food. Like all of those things. It's great, but God, nothing is free. It's mind-boggling to me sometimes that people are like, yeah, it's free student lunch. Oh, great. Well, of course, somebody foots the bill for all the free stuff when you're handing it out there. Who do you think is paying for all the flights for the illegals coming over the southern border, the phones, all this, that, and the other, the hotel rooms, all of it? We're paying for it. Somebody pays for that. It's not free. We don't have an endless supply of money. Aldo, we have seen Donald Trump, and I said this earlier, be very transparent, and everybody knows who Donald Trump is. Yeah, that's sort of baked in at this point. The big differences that we're seeing right now, aside from very obvious policy differences, although Kamala Harris is trying to rip off Donald Trump's policies now, because obviously people are like, nobody likes what you're trying to sell, is that Donald Trump is actually out in front of the press. Donald Trump did a press conference last week in stark contrast to Kamala Harris, who has heavily avoided the media. She's not done a press conference. She's not done a major interview of any variety since becoming the nominee for the Democrats. She did agree to the one debate. Now, Donald Trump has proposed 3 debates, of course. Interesting to me that the only debate Kamala Harris is willing to do is the ABC News debate. Fox News said we'll host a debate on September 4th, which is great because some states start sending out their absentee ballots as early as September 6th. People should have an opportunity, at the very least, to see these 2 people on a stage, these 2 candidates, hear from them. I feel like I said this about Joe Biden and Donald Trump prior to June 27th, but it's really amazing that there isn't more press interest in Kamala Harris. She's got that press pool traveling around with her. And what did JD Vance do last week? His plane landed at the same place that Kamala Harris's plane was. And he was like, you know what? I'm going to walk over and talk to her press pool because they're probably getting a little bit lonely. The fact that she's not even willing, Aldo, to come out and get in front of the press, to take real questions, to sit down for an interview, it would tell me as a voter, there's something she's trying to hide. She's trying to avoid this. And I feel like that may be a moment, either a press conference, if we ever see one from her, a real sit down interview, and not the cushy ones, but a real one. Or maybe it'll be at the debate on September 10th, which we know they're going to do together. That's when the shine, I think, wears off of Kamala Harris for a lot of people. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's probably the moment things change?
Of course. Of course. I mean, any successful campaign, right? They're going to lean into their strengths and shy away from their weaknesses. And Kamala Harris' biggest weakness is anytime she opens her mouth. I think that they're going to try to forego doing a debate for as long as possible. And I wouldn't be surprised if they canceled the one that they have on the books. Right?
A lot of people are saying that.
I think, why wouldn't they? Again, why would they not? What Kamala has going for her right now is the propaganda machine is running on full cylinders. It's running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week until the election is over. And they're not going to let off the gas. And I think anytime that Kamala opens her mouth, and it seems to be, honestly, anytime any Democratic candidate opens their mouth, it's bad for them. Look what just happened to Joe Biden. I don't think they're going to want to take a chance again and have to flip-flop their candidate again if Kamala Harris opens her mouth and does something stupid. So I think that it's a very effective strategy. I think it makes complete sense. But again, I mean, look at Donald Trump. Look at him. He's going everywhere. He's talking to people. He's meeting people. He's on the campaign trail. Mind you, he was shot in the head a couple weeks ago, and he's still out in the public talking to voters, hearing people what they have to say on the street. And it's very incredible to see. And again, it points to people are not voting for Kamala Harris. They're not voting. They weren't voting for Joe Biden. They're voting for all of the people around her. And it's a very, very scary precedent that's being set right now.
Vianca, the media has not interviewed Harris on television since June 24th, which was, of course, 3 days before Joe Biden's tragic debate with Donald Trump. The last time the press reportedly questioned Harris at a solo news conference was 8 months ago, excuse me, December 2nd, 2023. Only a few reports in the past few days recount Harris's lack of unscripted interviews, much less any headlines that slammed Harris for failing to sit for a primetime interview after receiving the nomination. The job of our media, the job of journalists, is supposed to be to give us fair, unbiased coverage, to really be able to give us what we need as voters in this country to make an informed decision going to the polls this election season. Again, people are going to start voting in early September in a lot of cases. And I guess the play is just to run the clock out. If you look back, at Pennsylvania, and you look back at that debate between John Fetterman and Dr. Oz, that debate happened after so many people had already voted for Fetterman, and then they were like, wait a minute, I voted for this guy. These debates really matter. What do you think? I hear what Aldo is saying. A lot of people are saying that they believe that Kamala Harris backs out of this debate. I maybe that's the case. I think it looks horrible for her to do so, but do voters know that? Do they know how bad that is? What do you think? Is she going to do it?
I think that might be a possibility, and I think it's unacceptable. Even the fact that we're hosting these debates right after, like you mentioned, a lot of people nationwide are going to be already casting their first vote. I think that if there's a way, I know that it's not legally required, but I would be more inclined to maybe legally require to have at least one debate prior to the first votes being casted, so that people could have at least a knowledge on what it is, the policies that both candidates are standing on. We could even do that after both conventions have taken place. But the point is that the voters need to know where they both stand. And right now, voters don't know where either one stands because we have a media and a press that refuses to ask the tough questions, and that's constantly focusing on Donald Trump saying this and Trump doing that, instead of actually focusing on the policies or asking and demanding even where the vice president is right now. Why is she hiding like Biden right now? Why is she not facing the press and the public and answering questions and even, just saying what it is that she's doing in the White House right now? Because she's out in the campaign trail, she's campaigning, but what about her duties? Why is she refusing to do her own job? So I mean, A lot could happen. A lot could happen in 1 month. I'm still trying to
A lot
remain
has
little bit
happened in 1 month.
optimistic. A lot has already happened in 1 month. A lot more could
Yeah.
happen. But I think that her honeymoon phase is going to be over the minute that they start hearing her in the debate, for sure, if she even shows up.
I hope she doesn't. I would argue July was one of the craziest months of my life personally. It's kind of wild if you go back and look at the month of July. It was crazy. There was so much that happened, and I feel like we're still all like kind of experiencing some like PTSD from it. I guess
I'm
the
so
plan.
sorry that you guys went through that.
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. Thank you. I mean, that's the other thing too, though, to me. And I wasn't even going to talk about this, but I feel like we might as well. What happened to that? Donald Trump got shot in the head, as Aldo pointed out. Oh my gosh, we're just done with that. Everybody seems to have moved on from that. We still don't have answers. We apparently were lied to in a lot of respects by at least the former Secret Service director. A lot of unanswered questions. We now have this video of the guy who saw the shooter on the roof, ran back to his car to get his gun. I don't know if anyone has seen that. It is one of the most upsetting videos. I forced myself to watch that entire video. The guy like fumbling around to get his gun together and figure out how to load it and get the clip in, the whole thing. It was very hard to watch because the whole time I know my father-in-law is on a stage with a guy with a gun who's trying to kill him, who actually did kill someone, who shot 2 other people in addition to my father-in-law. Aldo, are we just going to stop even caring about that? Like, what happened to getting to the bottom of that July 13th Butler, Pennsylvania rally? Where did that go? It seems to just have vanished in thin air.
You know, I don't have all the details and every single fact, so I don't want to speculate. But when you look at everything that happened, and when you look at everything that had to happen wrong in order for that shooter, Crooks, to be able to take that shot, it's hard not to come to some very, very scary conclusions, right? When you start putting the pieces together, how did he get there? And why was there not somebody there? Why was there not something in place? And why was there not communication? Where was the security here? When you put all those things together, I think you get a very, very scary picture. And I think some nefarious stuff went on. But, you know, to your point, again, where is the media? This is a former president and a current presidential candidate that was almost killed. And we don't have any answers. And I know that if this was the Democrats, they would be talking about this and it would be in the news cycle every single day since it happened up until the election. And I'm kind of wondering, what is the GOP doing, right? Where is the messaging? Where is their coverage of this? Because we do need answers. And I know the American public wants answers. We need to know what happened. We need more security. And again, it's a big failure on the media to be radio silent. And they're only doing it, I think, because of the candidate that this was perpetrated against.
I mean, sadly, I agree with you. And, you know, Vianca, I think sometimes, and first of all, I was actually pleasantly surprised in some of those hearings just after it happened, where they actually had the Secret Service director there, and then they have the new Secret Service director there. And they were very bipartisan in their attempt to get information. And I got to be honest, I know this sounds sick, but it actually made me feel good to think that everybody in this country all cared about getting answers and getting to the bottom of this, because it should be a nonpartisan issue. A former president nearly died. A person running for the presidency right now nearly died. Obviously, this is my family, and so I'm on a different level, and I can't even, you know, it's too much for me to really like take myself out of it. But nonetheless, I was very, very pleasantly surprised by the fact that it felt like everybody was together on this, and we were going to get to the bottom of this, and we weren't going to let this go. And man, people were upset on both sides of the aisle in those hearings. And I was like, this is great. It's great to see. But it does feel like now we're just letting it go. And I hate to say it, but I do believe that if it had been a different candidate, quite frankly, anyone other than Donald Trump, this would not be the end. People would still be talking about it. And I continue to think about not how lucky I was as a daughter-in-law, obviously, and we were as a party not to lose our candidate, but truly as a country. I mean, think of what this would have meant if a former president who is now running again for president was killed, was murdered on live television. Think of what that would have done to this country and the way people see us. And I said it in my speech at the convention, but Donald Trump had a moment there to think about, like, how do I respond? What do I do? And he says, like, look, I wanted to let people know I was okay, but it was so much bigger than him. It was so much bigger than only the people there at the rally or the people he knew the supporters were watching. He knew he had to get up, and he knew he had to do something to signal he was okay. And that was the fist in the air moment. And man, we're just so lucky, but we can't just let this go, because we cannot just assume everything is going the right direction. Oh, no, he's still here. We're fine. Everything's fine. We got to keep getting to the bottom of this. And I sure hope we do. And I sure hope people continue to talk about it, because we ought to.
Yeah.
I just have to say, Lara, Donald Trump, after that shooting, he had an opportunity to use that for political gain. And I know Democrats would have done the same thing. He had an opportunity to use this and talk about, I've been persecuted and I was almost killed, but he didn't. And that would have been very easy to do. And he unified the country. He said, hey, let's not do this. Let's get rid of the violence. Let's come together. It's probably the most unifying, bravest, and most courageous thing I've ever seen a president do in my lifetime, short lifetime. I've only been alive for 24 years. But I mean, really, the courage and the bravery and the unifying message behind that was so incredible. And I need to reiterate that, and I need to talk about that every chance I get, because it truly was an incredible moment. And I think it was Tucker Carlson who said at the RNC that Donald Trump became president that day because of what he did for the American people, and I completely agree.
I'm a little bit
say
more.
something else?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a little bit more frustrated, because I remember that day, and I was just at home with my husband, and then obviously that happened, and then we were called in to come immediately, to work. And I was shaking on my way here. Like I even cried at one point, because I was like, oh my God, I kept thinking about, one, him being affected, two, the people around him that were severely affected, and even the person that died. And then three, how the country was going to come back from this, because God forbid, had something happened to Donald Trump, I don't think that any of us would be here right now talking it up. Like, if this was just another day in America. I think that even then, I think that America changed. Like, we have a different America today after what happened. And I think it's super fair to say that Donald Trump also changed a little bit, and his perspective and maybe his shift on reality and life as well. But I think that it was also in a way for him to realize, what's at stake and how important it is to have somebody like him, who's not a career politician, who's not in it for anything that the deep state wants, who's actually in it for people like all of us here and the rest of the country that just want to have a better livelihood. And clearly none of these other people are going to do that for us. None of the Democrats are in it because they really want to improve our livelihoods. Their politics and their policies are just awful. And the thing is also, like, not even 24 hours after that happened, I was so ready personally to just maybe finally this being the moment for all of us to find unity with some of the people across the aisle. Yeah. But they were already spouting again and again how he was a dictator, how he caused it upon himself. And I was just like, how do you like, this is literally the narrative that caused a crazy person to do this to him. And it's not okay. It's never going to be okay in my book. And I don't see how I'm ever going to find unity with somebody that's going to keep saying those things. But yeah.
It's a shame. We had a moment, and I think we all felt that. And then they just spun up the crazy machine on the other side. And they said, wait a minute, we can't let this positively impact Donald Trump. Oh my God. And so now here we are. But guys, thank you to Vianca and Aldo. You guys are always so much fun to have on. Thank you for your perspective on everything. Thank you to everybody at home, as always, for joining us. Please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and follow. And we'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View.
And I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out.
Nothing is worse than being on a phone call that drops. Nothing is worse than trying to text someone and you can't reach them because your phone is out of service range. And nothing is worse than supporting these major corporations and companies who don't support us. That is why I love Patriot Mobile. They are America's only Christian conservative wireless network. They use every cell tower out there available to all networks so that they have the greatest 4G and 5G coverage nationwide, and they support the causes that are important to us as conservatives. If you go today to patriotmobile.com/Lara Trump and use the promo code Trump, you will get free activation today. Again, that is patriotmobile.com/Lara Trump. The promo code is Trump for free activation so that you can get a great cell plan and feel good about doing it.